Ever wondered if you're truly free? Freedom is the greatest illusion of our time. We cheer for the end of monarchies and dictatorships, but what if I told you we've just traded one kind of control for something even more dangerous? A system that convinces us we're free while keeping us trapped in a never-ending cycle. The average person will spend over 90,000 hours working in their lifetime, more than 10 years of your life. And for what? Just to pay for a life you barely have time to live. Sound like freedom to you? Let's dive deeper into how we've all been caught in this trap. Let's start with a simple question. Did you choose your job? Really think about it. Most people will say yes, but did you choose the options you had to pick from? Did you choose to need money to survive? Did you choose the economic system you were born into? The philosopher Rousseau famously wrote, "Man is born free, and everywhere he is in chains." But what are these chains? They're not physical anymore. They're psychological, financial, and social. From the moment you're born, you're placed on a predetermined path. Go to school, get good grades, find a stable job, buy a house, save for retirement, and then, if you're lucky, enjoy a few years of freedom before you die. This isn't your path. It's a path that was designed for you by the systems that came before you. Think of it this way. A zoo animal believes it has freedom because it can move around its enclosure, but it doesn't realize that its entire existence is contained within boundaries it didn't choose. Your life is much different. When you go to school, you're taught to follow rules, respect authority, and complete assignments on time. You're not taught to question the system itself. You're graded on how well you can perform, not on how well you think. This isn't an accident, it's by design. The modern education system was literally modeled after factories. In the early 20th century, industrialists like Henry Ford needed workers who would show up on time, follow instructions, and not question authority. Schools were redesigned to produce exactly this kind of person. The bell that signals the end of class was meant to condition you to respond to the factory whistle. By the time you graduate, you've spent over a decade being conditioned to fit into the rat race. You enter the workforce already programmed to accept your fate. And what is that fate? To trade your time and energy for money so you can buy things you're told will make you happy, but which mostly just distract you from the emptiness of your existence. And here's where it gets interesting. You think you have a choice, but the choices themselves are predetermined. You can choose which company to work for, but not whether to work. You can choose which products to buy, but not whether to participate in consumerism. The system gives you just enough freedom to prevent rebellion, but not enough to truly escape. Now, some of you might be thinking, I'm saving money, I'm investing, I'm going to escape this system. Let's look at the cold, hard math of why most people will fail. The median household income in America is around $70,000 after taxes. That's roughly $56,000, or about $4,700 per month. The average rent for a two-bedroom apartment is $1,800. Add utilities $200, groceries $800, healthcare $500, transportation $400, and other essentials $500. You're left with about $1,500 per month in disposable income. If you save all of that, which almost nobody does because we're constantly bombarded with advertisements designed to make us spend, you'd save $18,000 per year. At that rate, it would take you 28 years to save $500,000. Now, according to the 4% rule of retirement, $500,000 would generate about $20,000 per year in perpetual income. Nowhere near enough to live comfortably, let alone escape the rat race. But wait, you might say, what about investing? The average annual return from the stock market is about 7%. If you invested $1,500 per month for 30 years at 7% return, you'd end up with about $1.7 million. That would generate about $68,000 per year, finally enough to live on. But here's the catch. That's after 30 years of working. If you start at 25, you're 55 before you can escape. And this assumes you never face a major health crisis, never lose your job during a recession, never have to support aging parents, and never have children who need college tuition. The mathematical reality is brutal. The system is designed so that only a tiny fraction of people can escape it. For most, the best they can hope for is to retire at 65, after spending their prime years making someone else rich. And even this bleak scenario is becoming increasingly unrealistic. Studies show that nearly 40% of Americans can't cover a $400 emergency expense. Half of Americans have nothing saved for retirement. The math simply doesn't work for most people. This isn't because people are stupid or lazy. It's because the system is designed to extract maximum value from your labor while returning the minimum required to keep you working. It's not a conspiracy. It's just capitalism working as intended. If you want to understand why you feel trapped, it's not in your head. The trap is real, and it was built with mathematical precision. Even if you understand the economic trap, there's a deeper reason why most people never escape: psychological conditioning. From birth, we're taught that our value as human beings is tied to our productivity. What do you want to be when you grow up? Is one of the first questions we ask children, not what makes you curious or what brings you joy, but how will you fit into the economic machine? This conditioning creates a form of Stockholm syndrome, where we defend and even love the system that imprisons us. We celebrate hustle culture and working ourselves to exhaustion. We admire billionaires who work 80-hour weeks, even as they exploit thousands of workers. We've internalized the belief that suffering for work is virtuous. When someone suggests an alternative, like universal basic income or a 4-day work week, the most visceral opposition often comes from the people who would benefit most. But that's socialism, they cry, without understanding that the current system is failing them. This psychological conditioning is reinforced by what psychologists call the just world fallacy, the belief that the world is fundamentally fair, and therefore, those who succeed deserve their success, and those who struggle deserve their suffering. This fallacy serves a powerful psychological purpose. It helps us cope with the randomness and unfairness of life. It's comforting to believe that if you work hard, you'll succeed. The alternative, accepting that success is largely determined by factors outside your control, like where and to whom you were born, is existentially terrifying. So, we cling to myths like meritocracy and the American dream, even as all evidence points to their hollowness. The child born into poverty has almost no chance of becoming wealthy, regardless of how hard they work. The data is clear. Social mobility in America has been declining for decades. Your zip code at birth is more predictive of your future income than your college major. Yet we continue to blame individuals for systemic failures. You're not hustling enough. You should have learned to code. You chose the wrong career. This isn't just wrong. It's a form of gaslighting that serves the system by preventing collective action. And here's where it gets truly insidious. Even when we recognize these psychological chains, we often can't break them. The fear of deviating from the prescribed path is too great. What if you quit your job to pursue meaning instead of money and you fail? What if you reject consumerism and find yourself socially isolated? The system doesn't just control our bodies through economic necessity. It controls our minds through fear. So, who built this system? Conspiracy theorists might point to shadowy cabals of elites, but the truth is both simpler and more complex. No one designed the rat race in its entirety, yet everyone in power benefits from its continuation. The modern work paradigm evolved from industrial capitalism, which itself evolved from feudalism. In each evolution, the fundamental dynamic remained the same. A small group owns the means of production, while the majority must sell their labor to survive. What changed was the narrative. Under feudalism, the justification was divine right. God had ordained the social hierarchy. Under industrial capitalism, it became freedom. You were free to choose your employer, unlike the serfs who were bound to their lords. Today's justification is more sophisticated: meritocracy. The system is fair because anyone can succeed if they work hard enough. This narrative persists despite overwhelming evidence to the contrary. But if no single group designed the system, who maintains it? The answer lies in understanding power and incentives. Consider the typical corporate hierarchy. The CEO's compensation is often hundreds of times higher than the average worker's. Does the CEO work hundreds of times harder? Of course not, but they benefit enormously from a system that undervalues labor and overvalues capital and management. Politicians too have little incentive to change the system. Their campaigns are funded by the wealthy and by corporations, who naturally support candidates who protect their interests. The revolving door between government and industry ensures that regulators often come from and return to the very industries they're meant to regulate. Media conglomerates owned by the ultra-wealthy frame economic discussions in ways that support the status quo. Questions like, how will we pay for universal health care, are asked constantly, while questions like, how can we afford endless war, are rarely raised. Even academia is not immune. Economics departments receive funding from financial institutions and teach theories that justify existing power structures. Professors who challenge orthodox economic thinking often find themselves marginalized. This isn't to say there's a room somewhere where the powerful gather to conspire against the masses. They don't need to. The system naturally evolves to protect those who benefit from it most. The tragedy is that many who defend the system most vigorously are those it harms. The factory worker arguing against unions, the gig worker opposing labor protections, the indebted student fighting universal education. Through sophisticated propaganda, people are convinced to advocate against their own interests. If the traditional rat race wasn't bad enough, technology has accelerated and intensified our imprisonment in ways previous generations couldn't imagine. In the past, at least when you left work, you were free. Now, with smartphones and remote work, the boundary between work and life has completely eroded. Emails at dinner, Slack notifications on weekends, the expectation of constant availability. The average person checks their phone 96 times per day. That's once every 10 minutes of a waking life. And each check activates the brain's dopamine system, creating a dependency loop that keeps us perpetually distracted and unable to engage in the deep thinking necessary to question our circumstances. Social media doesn't just consume our attention, it commodifies it. Every scroll, click, and like is monetized. Your attention is literally being sold to advertisers. You're not just a worker in the modern economy, you're also the product. And as artificial intelligence advances, the situation becomes even more precarious. Jobs that seemed secure a decade ago are now threatened by automation. The World Economic Forum predicts that by 2025, 85 million jobs may be displaced by machines, while only 97 million new ones will be created. And these new jobs will require completely different skills. This creates a permanent state of anxiety and insecurity. You're never sure if your job will exist tomorrow, so you work harder today, take fewer vacations, accept lower pay, and generally compromise your well-being to prove your worth. Meanwhile, the benefits of this technological revolution flow primarily to those who already hold capital. The 5 largest tech companies now have a combined market capitalization, larger than the GDP of most countries. Their founders have accumulated wealth that would have made the kings of old blush with envy. And what are these companies selling us? Largely escape from the very reality they help create. Netflix to distract us from our exhaustion, Instagram to give us the illusion of connection in an increasingly isolated world, Amazon to deliver dopamine hits of consumption without the hassle of leaving our homes. Technology promised to free us from drudgery, to create a world of abundance where we could work less and live more. Instead, it has tethered us more tightly to the hamster wheel while dangling ever more sophisticated carrots just out of reach. The digital rat race doesn't replace the traditional one. It enhances it, accelerates it, and makes it nearly inescapable. Even as you watch this video, seeking understanding and perhaps a way out, you're being served advertisements. Your viewing habits are being tracked, and algorithms are determining what content to show you next, all to maximize your engagement and, by extension, your economic value to the platform. So, is escape impossible? Not entirely, but it's far more difficult than most financial freedom gurus would have you believe, and the paths are narrower than most realize. Let's look at the rare few who do manage to escape the rat race and understand what actually makes it possible. First, there's exceptional talent or luck. The professional athlete, the successful entrepreneur, the viral content creator. These paths do exist, but they're available to a tiny fraction of people. For every successful startup founder, thousands fail. For every YouTube millionaire, millions of creators earn nothing. These exceptions don't disprove the rule. they exemplify just how rare escape truly is. Second, there's inherited advantage. It's no accident that many of the most celebrated self-made billionaires came from upper-middle class or wealthy families. Elon Musk's father owned an emerald mine. Bill Gates' mother helped IBM hire Microsoft. Jeff Bezos received a $300,000 investment from his parents to start Amazon. Even with tremendous talent and work ethic, these individuals started far ahead of most. Third, there's geographic arbitrage, earning money in high-income economies while living in low-cost areas. This has become more viable with remote work, but it remains inaccessible to many whose jobs require physical presence, and it often relies on global inequality to function. Fourth, there's extreme frugality combined with consistent investing. The FIRE movement, financial independence, retire early, while theoretically available to more people, typically requires an above-average income to begin with. The discipline to save 50 to 70% of that income for years or decades, and the willingness to live far below the standard consumption patterns that society expects. And finally, there's the communal approach, pooling resources with like-minded individuals to create alternative economic structures. Intentional communities, cooperatives, and mutual aid networks can create microeconomies that operate partially outside the mainstream system. What's notable about all these paths is that none of them challenge the system itself. They are individual or small group solutions to a collective problem. They're escapes, not revolutions. And this points to perhaps the most profound trap of all, the individualization of a systemic problem. By framing escape from the rat race as a personal achievement rather than a collective right, the system ensures that most people will continue to blame themselves for their failure to achieve the impossible. The truth is that for most people, true escape will only come through systemic change, through policies like universal basic income, wealth redistribution, shortened work weeks, and strengthened labor protections. But these changes require collective action, which is precisely what our individualistic culture discourages. So, we're left with a painful paradox. Individual escape is possible but improbable, while collective escape is probable but dependent on a solidarity that the system systematically undermines. There's an old parable about a man who finds another man fishing by a river. The first man teaches the second how to fish more efficiently, allowing him to catch more fish in less time. The second man thanks him, then puts away his fishing rod when he's caught enough for the day. The first man asks, "Why are you stopping? You could catch more fish now." The second replies, "Why would I need more fish than I can eat? I'd rather spend the rest of my day with my family and friends." This simple wisdom, that time is more valuable than excess production, threatens the very foundation of the rat race. Perhaps the ultimate escape isn't earning more or accumulating more, but wanting less and connecting more. Ask yourself, what would your life look like if you measured success not by what you own, but by how present you are? Not by your productivity, but by your peace? Not by your achievements, but by your awareness? These questions don't provide an easy escape from the rat race, but they might just help you recognize the bars of your cage, and recognition is always the first step toward freedom.